It started with a moment so ordinary, it might have slipped past me if not for the way it lingered. I was digging through the drawer in the hallway, looking for a warranty slip or a receipt, some forgotten paper buried beneath old candles, pens that no longer worked, and a pack of batteries long dead. My hand brushed against an envelope I didn't recognize. It was heavy, sealed but not labeled. I opened it without thinking and found a stack of photographs. Printed, matte, a little bent at the corners. The kind of photos people rarely bother to print anymore. My thumb paused on the top one. It was me, not recent, at least 10 years ago. I was wearing a bikini I barely remembered owning, the kind with thin straps that dug slightly into the shoulders. My hair was wet and loose, stuck to my neck from the pool. I was smiling. Someone had just said something that made me laugh. But what struck me wasn't my expression. It was the person beside me. Her, my husband's sister, standing close, nearly pressed to my side, her arm hooked around my waist, her face angled toward me but not looking at the camera, looking at me. There was something about her eyes in that picture, something I hadn't noticed before. Not exactly longing, not desire spelled out plainly, but something in the direction of that, something that no longer felt platonic when viewed through the lens of time and distance. I set the photo down on the hallway cable and stared at it for longer than I should have. That image held a different truth now, one that whispered rather than screamed, but still made my skin warm beneath my clothes. That night, I couldn't sleep. I told myself it was just the wine, just the weight of the day. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face in that photo. Not the version I knew today, the confident, stylish, career-minded woman who breezed in and out of our house for dinners and birthdays, but the younger version, unguarded, raw, watching me with something she hadn't meant to reveal. And if that had been a look of something deeper, then what did it say about everything that came after? I started reviewing memories like files. I remembered the time she helped me zip up a dress in the guest bathroom, her fingers brushing my spine. I remembered the way her eyes lingered when I wore my hair up. I remembered the Christmas she gave me perfume and insisted I open it privately. I remembered the time she stayed over for a week after her breakup and how she always sat too close on the couch, our thighs pressed together under the blanket. I told myself those moments were nothing. I had always believed them to be nothing, but now each one felt marked, tinted by the suggestion I couldn't erase. Over the next few days, I found myself watching her differently. She came over for dinner, laughing loudly in the kitchen, opening a bottle of wine without asking. She always did that, always made herself at home. But now I noticed her touches, how often they landed on me, how naturally they stayed there. A hand on my arm when she passed me the salt, her palm against my back as she reached into a cabinet, a hug that lasted just 2 seconds too long. My body started responding in ways that surprised me. My breath hitched, my skin tightened. I felt heat in places I hadn't felt it in years, and not from my husband's hands. The most dangerous part was that it didn't feel threatening. It felt warm, familiar, like something my body had already made peace with, even if my mind hadn't. There was no flirtation, not explicitly, no words that crossed a line, but her presence filled the room with an unspoken weight, a slow, pulsing awareness that buzzed beneath every casual interaction. And I realized, with a mix of guilt and fascination, that I wasn't avoiding it. I was drawing closer to it. I was leaning in. I began to test things, subtle, harmless on the surface, a low-cut blouse when she came for dinner, leaning a little closer when we sat on the couch, laughing too loudly at something she said, just to feel the way her eyes landed on my mouth. I wore lipstick one evening for no one in particular, but she noticed. I could feel it. There was a tension there, one that wasn't imagined. And I began to wonder if she was waiting for something, if she was watching me watch her. if we were both playing a game we didn't have the courage to name. One afternoon, I came home early. My husband wasn't there, but she was. She'd stopped by to drop something off, or so she said, standing in the kitchen with a glass of water and no real reason to leave. I stood across from her, watching the way she held the rim of the glass, the way she looked at me from under her lashes, the way the room felt charged with something neither of us dared to disturb. I told myself to move, to say something, but I didn't. Later that night, I thought again of the photo. I retrieved it from the hallway table and brought it to my bedroom. I stared at it for a long time. Then I slipped it into the drawer beside my bed, like a secret, like something too delicate to throw away. And when I lay down to sleep, I closed my eyes and imagined her hands, not where they had been, but where they might go. Something had shifted, quietly, irreversibly, and I knew, without needing to hear it aloud, that this wasn't one-sided. There was something living between us, something buried but breathing, and it was only a matter of time before it came to the surface. The evening unfolded like any other, wrapped in the predictable comfort of routine. My husband's birthday had just ended, and the house had quieted into a kind of soft chaos. Empty plates stacked in the sink, faint traces of music still echoing in the walls, and the scent of red wine clinging to the air. Everyone had left or gone to bed. Only she and I remained, curled up in the dim-lit living room, surrounded by flickering candles and half-finished drinks. Her shoes were off, feet tucked beneath her on the couch, and I sat just across, legs crossed, fingertips idly tracing the rim of my glass. Everything felt normal, and yet nothing did. There was something in the air that didn't belong to the evening, a heaviness, a weight that seemed to rest on the skin like humidity, but without the stickiness. I felt it in my chest, in the shallow breaths I kept taking, in the way my fingers trembled slightly each time I lifted the glass to my lips. She was watching me. I could feel it, even without turning to meet her eyes. Her gaze was steady, familiar, but tonight it burned, like it carried intent, like it had teeth. I shifted slightly, adjusting my position, trying to ground myself. The wine had gone warm. I swirled it absent-mindedly, not because I wanted more, but because my hands needed something to do. She laughed softly at something, a half-formed thought that she let drift between us. It was then that she stood and walked behind me, not with purpose, but with ease. I expected her to go to the kitchen, to leave the moment fragile and unformed. Instead, she stopped behind me, so close I could feel the heat of her presence pressing into the back of my neck. Her fingers brushed against my shoulder, barely a touch, more suggestion than contact. I froze, breath catching somewhere between my lungs and throat. She didn't move away. Her hand hovered there, then rested gently, a palm full of warmth and quiet demand. My skin reacted instantly. A prickle of awareness ran down my spine, and I could feel the pulse at the base of my throat throb harder. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The room seemed to tilt slightly off-center, every sound muffled, except for the soft hum of blood in my ears. Then she spoke. The words landed softly, but precisely, each one deliberate, shaped by breath and nerve. I didn't process them all at once. My mind clung to the first few, fragments of longing, memories she had stored in silence, images I had no idea existed within her. She talked about me, not in passing, not as a sister-in-law, not as family, but as something else, something wanted, desired, repeatedly imagined. She spoke of nights when her body betrayed her, when thoughts of me crept into places she couldn't resist. Her voice trembled, but not from fear, from need. I sat there motionless, absorbing each word like heat soaking into my skin. My cheeks flushed, but not with embarrassment. It was something darker, heavier, more intimate. She hadn't touched me beyond that single lingering hand on my shoulder, but my entire body was responding as if she had. My thighs pressed together instinctively, a wave of warmth radiating through me. I felt seen in a way I hadn't in years, not observed, not complimented, but known, stripped down to something elemental and raw. Still, I didn't turn to face her. I didn't trust myself to. If I met her eyes, I knew the illusion of restraint would shatter completely. Instead, I stared straight ahead at the candlelight flickering on the far wall, my breath coming shallow and fast. Her hand slid away, but her presence remained, a weight in the air that refused to dissipate. She returned to the couch, slower now, movements fluid and quiet. She resumed her place, but the space between us was charged, alive with everything she had said and everything I hadn't. I kept thinking about the way she described me, how she had remembered things I had forgotten, clothes I'd worn, gestures I'd made, the shape of my back in a particular dress. She had watched me, studied me, preserved me in her imagination like a secret she never intended to share. And now it was out, floating between us, irretrievable, irreversible, a fantasy no longer held in silence, a truth spoken aloud. I looked at her finally, not directly, just enough to catch the edge of her profile. She looked composed, almost indifferent, but her hands betrayed her, fingers clenched lightly against her thigh, knuckles pale. She had said what she needed to say, and now it was up to me to carry the weight of knowing it. That night, I lay in bed next to my husband, who slept soundly, unaware. My body faced away from him, curled on its side, and I stared at the wall, blanketed in shadows. My skin still remembered the touch of her hand, the warmth of her breath near my ear, the tremble in her voice. I replayed her words over and over again until they etched themselves into my bones. I felt breathless, not from fear or confusion, but from the awakening of something I had spent my life denying. I didn't sleep much. My mind drifted to her in the guest room downstairs, where the door was likely left cracked and the sheets pulled halfway down her body. I imagined her skin bare beneath them, flushed from wine, from the courage it took to say what she had. I imagined her breath slowing, her fingers brushing her own skin, perhaps pretending it was mine. That image rooted itself deep inside me, blooming with heat and shame and longing. By morning, nothing on the surface had changed, but inside, everything had. I could no longer pretend, not after hearing the way she wanted me, not after feeling how my own body answered. Something irreversible had happened in that moment, between the confession and the silence that followed. Something had opened. And though I didn't yet know what I would do with it, I understood one thing clearly. She hadn't just said it to unburden herself. She had said it because she knew, and now so did I. It happened on a night that held no significance. No birthdays, no holidays, no excuses. Just a quiet evening draped in routine, the kind where the hours bleed together and the silence feels deeper than usual. The house had settled. My husband was away for the weekend, and I had the place to myself. I lit candles without thinking, poured a glass of wine without ceremony, and let the stillness take up space. She arrived unannounced, though not unexpectedly. She always seemed to appear when I was least guarded. She brought nothing but herself. No bottle, no book, no reason. Just her presence, easy and confident, as if she belonged to the moment before it even started. She dropped her bag by the door and slipped off her shoes like this had been planned, even if neither of us had said the words aloud. I offered her wine, and she accepted with a glance that made my stomach twist. Everything about her felt deliberate that night. Her hair loosely pinned, a strand falling across her cheek, the neckline of her shirt low enough to make me look away, then look back again. She was dressed simply, but it was the simplicity that undid me. We sat close on the couch, legs barely touching, the tension between us like a taut string ready to snap. I felt her heat before I felt her hands. She shifted closer, the air changing, the room shrinking. Her fingers reached for mine, but not to hold. They grazed, wandered, paused. My skin responded with a shiver, a tightening in my chest, a pulse that beat too loud in too many places. I didn't speak. I didn't move away. I just let her come closer. When her lips touched mine, it wasn't soft. It wasn't hesitant. It was the kind of kiss that held years inside it. Her mouth was warm and open, tasting of wine and something deeper, something restless. I responded before I even realized it, my hand reaching instinctively for the back of her neck, pulling her closer, deepening the kiss as if I'd been starved for it. Our mouths moved in rhythm, slow and greedy, tasting each other like something stolen. She guided me gently, her movements confident but careful. My back met the couch cushions, her weight easing onto me, a knee sliding between my thighs. Her hands began to explore without apology. Fingertips traced along my collarbone, down my sides, beneath the fabric of my blouse. Every place she touched felt new, even though it had been mine all along. I arched into her hand without thinking, desperate for more contact, more sensation. My breath caught in my throat, my body aching in ways I had forgotten it could. She pulled my blouse over my head, exposing skin that trembled under her gaze. Her eyes moved over me slowly, not as if assessing, but as if savoring. Then her lips followed, pressing against my neck, down my chest, over the swell of my breast. Her tongue was soft, deliberate, circling my nipple before taking it between her lips. I gasped, my back lifting from the couch, my fingers tangling in her hair. Every nerve in my body lit up, every sense overwhelmed by the feel of her mouth, the sound of her breathing, the weight of her body sinking into mine. My skirt bunched at my hips as her hand slid beneath it, trailing up my inner thigh with maddening patience. She touched me through the fabric of my underwear, her fingers firm, teasing, knowing. I moaned without shame, grinding against her palm, needing more than she was giving. She pulled the fabric aside and slipped her fingers over me, warm and slick. I opened for her instinctively, completely, surrendering to the rhythm of her hand. When she entered me, I gasped again, louder, sharper, fuller. Her movements were slow at first, coaxing, exploring, but as I rocked against her, they grew more urgent. She kissed me as she moved inside me, her free hand cradling my jaw, her body pressing harder into mine. My thighs clenched around her wrist, my breath coming in broken waves, my nails dragging down her back. And then it hit, sharp and sudden, like lightning under my skin. I came with a cry I couldn't hold back, my body pulsing around her fingers, my head thrown back in surrender. It was too much and not enough. I wanted to stay in that feeling forever. She held me as the tremors passed, her mouth soft against my shoulder, her hand stroking my side. My body was spent, but I craved her still. I pulled her down, kissed her again, slower this time, more tender. She let me undress her, inch by inch, revealing soft skin, firm curves, muscles that tensed beneath my touch. I ran my fingers over her stomach, her hips, the swell of her breasts. Her breath hitched when I touched her thighs, and she opened for me without words. I kissed my way down her body, taking my time, tasting every part of her. She trembled beneath me, her hands gripping the cushions, her body arching toward my mouth. When my tongue found her, she moaned, a low, desperate sound that I wanted to hear again and again. I moved slowly, savoring her, letting her guide me with the rhythm of her breath, the twitch of her hips, the tightening of her fingers in my hair. She came with a gasp and a shudder, her thighs clamping around my head, her body shaking beneath me like something unraveling. We lay tangled afterward, breathless and silent, the room thick with the scent of sex and candle wax. Her skin was warm against mine, her heartbeat steady under my palm. I traced lazy circles on her back, not ready to let go, not ready to leave the softness of what we'd created. I closed my eyes and tried to memorize everything, the weight of her body, the taste of her mouth, the sound she made when she let go. I wanted to trap it all inside me, keep it safe, hold it forever. Even now, I can still taste her. Not just her skin or her lips, but the moment itself, the taste of risk, of permission, of something forbidden made real. It lingers in the corners of my memory like smoke, subtle, seductive, impossible to chase away. And I know I'll carry it with me, pressed into my body like a bruise only I can feel. It was the kind of night that rewrites everything, the kind of night that stains the skin and sweetens the soul, the kind of night that refuses to fade. A taste I will never forget. The morning light was cruel in its honesty. It streamed through the curtains in pale slats, illuminating everything we had done the night before. The softness of the candlelight was gone, replaced by an unfiltered clarity that touched the rumpled sheets, the empty wine glass tipped sideways on the nightstand, and the indentation of bodies left behind on the mattress. I lay on my side, motionless, eyes open, watching dust dance in the light as my mind clung to the silence. Her breath moved slow and steady behind me, warm against my spine, rhythmic like the ticking of a slow clock. I didn't dare move. I wasn't ready for whatever reality would solidify the moment I shifted. Her arm was draped across my waist, heavy with sleep, her body pressed against mine in a way that felt natural, almost inevitable. But nothing about this was simple. The scent of her skin was still on me, sweet and sharp, mixed with sweat and wine and something more dangerous. My thighs still ached from how tightly they had wrapped around her. My lips felt tender, swollen with memory. I closed my eyes and pretended I was still dreaming. In that imaginary space, there were no questions, no guilt, no timelines. Just the way her mouth had moved down my body, the tremble in her voice when I touched her, the wet sound of breath against breath as we lost ourselves in each other. I replayed the curve of her hip beneath my palm, the shiver in her chest as she came, the softness of her hand threading through my hair after. I held on to those images like a lifeline, as if clinging to them could delay the weight of consequences. Eventually, she stirred. Her body shifted slightly, her arm slipping away, her breath becoming more conscious, more alert. I felt the moment her eyes opened, even though I didn't turn to look. A subtle tension entered the space between us, thin as wire but unmistakable. I wondered if she felt regret or shame, or if she was simply waiting for me to set the tone. I hated the uncertainty, the ambiguity that now hovered like smoke in a room without windows. She sat up slowly. The sheets slid down her back, exposing smooth skin dotted with faint marks from my mouth. I watched her through half-lidded eyes, pretending to still be asleep, though my pulse betrayed me. Her fingers combed through her hair absent-mindedly. She reached for her shirt, but didn't put it on. She just held it in her lap, as if unsure what to do with it, with herself, with me. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing against my chest, heavy and warm and impossible to move. I finally turned toward her, not all at once, just enough to see the curve of her profile, the line of her shoulder, the tension in her jaw. Her face was unreadable, not cold, not soft, just somewhere in between, a liminal space where decisions are made in silence. I wanted to say something, but had no words. What could I possibly offer that wouldn't collapse everything we'd shared into something small? So I said nothing. I watched her stand, watched her wrap the sheet around her body and disappear into the hallway. The bedroom felt hollow once she was gone. The absence of her body left a strange coldness in the sheets, in the air, in my breath. I stared at the ceiling, trying to summon a version of myself that could make sense of what had happened. But I didn't feel like myself. I felt fractured, rewritten, as if something fundamental inside me had been rearranged. And it wasn't just about the sex. It wasn't about heat or urgency. It was about the look in her eyes when she touched me, the care in her hands, the aching tenderness that had lingered long after. I eventually rose from the bed and moved toward the mirror. My reflection startled me. My hair was a mess, my skin flushed in places, my mouth still parted slightly, as if I hadn't fully come down from the high. I looked like a woman who had been touched deeply, thoroughly, deliberately. And yet, I also looked like someone who had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. I didn't recognize my own eyes, how wide they were, how unsure, how alive. Down the hall, I heard the clink of dishes, the sound of water running, the quiet hum of her voice. She was in the kitchen, moving through the space like nothing had changed. Oh, maybe everything had changed, and she was pretending it hadn't. I didn't know how to meet her now. I didn't know what version of me would walk through that doorway. The wife, the friend, the woman who had moaned her name in the dark. I dressed slowly, deliberately, pulling soft fabric over sore skin. Every movement felt heightened, like I was walking through a memory rather than a moment. I stepped into the hallway and paused. The light coming from the kitchen was warm and golden, familiar and foreign all at once. I could see her silhouette as she poured coffee, as if this morning was like any other. My heart ached at the simplicity of it, at the lie of normalcy laid over the truth of what had happened between us. She turned when she heard me. Our eyes met. There was no greeting, no smile, no judgment, just a shared understanding suspended in silence. I took the mug she offered, and our fingers brushed. That touch, brief as it was, sent a ripple through me. It said more than any words could. We drank in silence, not out of discomfort, but because silence now belonged to us. It held the weight of everything that had been done and everything that might still be undone. I looked at her over the rim of my mug and saw someone both familiar and entirely new. She wasn't just my husband's sister anymore. She was a mirror now, a reflection of something I hadn't known I needed. And as we stood there in the soft hum of morning, pretending nothing had changed, I knew something had, permanently. We had stepped into a territory where roles blurred, where rules bent, where the skin still remembered what the mind wasn't ready to process. And yet, I didn't want to leave that space. I didn't want to run from it, erase it, fold it neatly into denial. I wanted to stay in the ache, in the quiet, in the trembling awareness of what we had touched. Because the truth was simple and terrifying. I had tasted something I could not forget. And no matter how far I tried to go, I would carry the morning with me, pressed like a fingerprint against the most private part of my memory. A morning I couldn't undo, a morning I didn't want to escape. I began to orbit her without meaning to. My days shaped themselves around her presence or the absence of it. I found reasons to be in the same room, to brush past her in the hallway, to linger a moment longer near the doorframe when she was speaking. It wasn't about planning or manipulation. It was instinct, something feral and internal that had been activated and couldn't be put back to sleep. My body had learned something it wasn't willing to forget. Each time our skin touched, no matter how briefly, a current passed through me. Her fingers grazing my wrist as we passed a dish across the table. The way her thigh would rest against mine on the couch, steady and warm. The accidental touches became deliberate, and the deliberate ones became necessary. She knew it too. I could see it in the way her breath caught when I stood too close behind her, the way her eyes dropped to my mouth when I licked wine from my lips. We were locked in a quiet war, and no one else could hear it. I started dressing differently, not dramatically, just enough to feel her eyes. A lower neckline, a softer fabric, no bra on days when I knew she would be near. I wore perfume again, just behind my ears, and watched how she responded to the scent when she leaned in to speak. Sometimes I would bend a little more slowly to pick something up, or let my robe hang a little looser in the mornings. I wasn't proud of it. I also wasn't sorry. Desire had become a lens, and she was the only thing in focus. It didn't take long before I began anticipating her movements. I would know when she was about to enter a room, like I could feel the air change before the door opened. I listened for her footsteps like music, found myself smiling before I even saw her. She started leaving small traces of herself around the house. A pair of socks draped on the back of a chair, a half-finished coffee mug beside mine, a hoodie that smelled like her left on the hook near the stairs. It was subtle, but intentional. She was claiming space without asking. One afternoon, I opened the fridge and found a single peach sitting in the middle of the shelf. I hadn't bought it, but I knew she had. It sat there like a dare, ripe and vulnerable. I picked it up and ran my thumb along the soft skin, imagining her teeth sinking into it, juice trailing down her chin. I ate it slowly at the sink, my mind painting scenes that made my knees weak. When she entered the room and saw the pit resting on the counter, she smirked. She didn't have to say a word. She knew exactly what she'd done. We didn't speak of what was happening. That was part of the thrill. No confrontations, no declarations, just this quiet, pulsing thing between us, growing louder with each silent day. We moved through the house like magnets pulled in opposite directions, but destined to collide. I started fantasizing at inappropriate times, while folding laundry, while washing dishes, even during phone calls. Her hands, her voice, the heat of her mouth. I relived the night we spent together with obsessive precision. Every sound, every angle, every gasp etched into my body like scripture. At night, I lay beside my husband and imagined her instead. I stopped initiating intimacy with him altogether. I couldn't fake it anymore. My body only responded to the memory of her now. I would close my eyes and bite my lip in the dark, pretending it was her hand sliding beneath the sheets, her breath against my neck. I would press my thighs together and pray he wouldn't hear the way my breath changed. It felt wrong, and yet it felt more right than anything had in years. We started spending time together outside the house. Errands, she would say, rides to the store, trips to the coffee shop, but they became excuses to be alone. The car became a cocoon. She would rest her hand on the gear shift too close to mine. We would sit in the parking lot longer than necessary, the air thick with the possibility of touch. Once, she reached over and tucked my hair behind my ear. Her fingertips lingered at the base of my jaw, and I shivered so visibly she smiled. She didn't apologize. She just looked at me like she already knew how I tasted. I began craving her presence the way some people crave sugar or salt. It was a physical ache when she wasn't near. I would check my phone and find no messages, then immediately imagine her fingers on someone else's skin and feel sick with jealousy. I had no right to it, but it bloomed anyway, dark and wild. She had unlocked something in me that refused to be reasoned with. Every minute she didn't look at me felt like punishment. Every second she did was a reward I didn't deserve. There were days we barely touched, but the tension was unbearable. She would walk past me, her shoulder brushing mine, and it would feel more intimate than any kiss. One morning, I stood behind her at the sink, watching the way her hair curled slightly at the nape of her neck. My hand hovered just above her back, not quite touching, and yet I could feel the burn of the almost. She turned slightly, not enough to face me, just enough to let me know she felt it too. We were speaking in a language made of glances and gestures, pauses and breathing, a conversation without sound, a contract neither of us had signed but both obeyed. I wanted her in every room. I wanted her scent on every pillow, her taste on every glass. I found her bobby pins on the bathroom counter and felt my knees go weak. I clutched them like relics, proof that this was real, proof that she had been close enough to lose hair in my space. I began to forget what life was like before she touched me, before she looked at me like I was something she dreamed of for years. Everything else faded. My routines, my responsibilities, my reflection. She became the center. I revolved around her like a desperate moon, pulled by gravity I couldn't explain. It didn't matter what anyone else saw. To the outside world, we were still just family. Inside this house, we were something much darker. She didn't need to kiss me again to claim me. She already had. Every glance, every near touch, every breath we shared in the narrow spaces between obligation and longing, it all became part of the agreement. We didn't speak it aloud, we didn't name it, but it bound us tightly, and I knew deep down that I would follow that agreement into ruin, willingly, without question, with open arms. I thought I had some control over it. I thought I could keep everything in its compartment. What happened in the dark, the heat of her skin, the taste of her mouth, separate from the life I continued to perform in daylight. I convinced myself that secrets were safest when they had no witness. But desire has its own intelligence. It seeps through cracks, leaks into gestures, warps expressions, and lingers on the breath long after the act. Eventually, no matter how careful I was, something began to show. The first rupture came quietly, a missed call from my husband while she and I were tangled in sheets, a forgotten earring on the nightstand that wasn't mine, lipstick smudged in places it shouldn't have been, little things I overlooked because I didn't want to believe anyone would notice. But secrets make people sloppy, and I was no exception. He never said anything, not then, but his eyes changed when he looked at me, as if they were always squinting through a fog, trying to see what I was hiding. She didn't seem concerned. She moved through the house like a shadow that belonged there, wearing my clothes, drinking from my cup, lounging in the corners of my marriage like she had been granted quiet ownership. Her confidence was maddening. It made me reckless. We started taking more risks, lingering touches and shared spaces, lips brushing too close in passing, fingers tracing lines under the table during dinner. It became a game, a dare. How close could we get before it all exploded? The explosion came one Sunday afternoon. The house smelled like roast chicken and lemon soap. My husband was outside trimming hedges. She and I were in the kitchen, alone. She reached across me to grab something from the counter, and her hand brushed the side of my breast, not accidentally. I froze. She smiled. And in that moment, I heard the sound that changed everything, a click. Soft, deliberate, unmistakable. I turned slowly, and there he was, in the doorway, holding his phone, camera raised. He didn't say a word, just watched us, eyes dark and unreadable. Then he turned and walked away. I didn't chase him. I couldn't move, my feet rooted to the tile as panic crept up my spine. She looked at me, not with fear, but with something almost amused. I wanted to scream, to beg her to leave, to undo everything with a single breath. But none of those things would change what had just happened. We had been seen, captured, frozen in time with all the implications and betrayals embedded in the silence between shudder and breath. He left that night, packed a bag, and drove away without asking for an explanation. I stood in the window as his car disappeared down the road. I didn't cry. I didn't call after him. I only turned around to find her sitting on the couch, legs crossed, sipping wine like it was any other evening. There was something too calm in the way she looked at me, as if this had always been inevitable, as if she had never once believed we would get away with it. I told her to leave. She didn't move. That's when she pulled out the flash drive. It was small, silver, unlabeled. She placed it on the coffee table between us like a peace offering or a weapon. I stared at it and then at her. She said nothing, but her eyes held something I didn't recognize, something layered. I picked it up, walked to my laptop, and inserted it. The screen lit up. Dozens of folders, dozens of videos, none of them labeled, but all familiar. The first one opened to static, then grainy footage. My bedroom, a high corner angle. I saw myself, asleep. And then her, crawling into bed beside me. I saw things I had forgotten, things I had buried. I clicked another, the bathroom, another, the guest room. All of them us. Some of them from nights I didn't remember. Some from nights I did, but not like this. I turned to her, horror slowly forming in the shape of disbelief. She still didn't speak. She didn't need to. This hadn't been an accident. It hadn't been a moment of weakness or shared hunger. It had been curated, controlled, observed. She stood and walked to me. Her fingers slid under my chin and lifted my face to hers. Her eyes weren't cruel. They were calm, almost tender. She leaned in and kissed me, softly, slowly. A kiss that didn't ask for permission, but didn't force anything either. A kiss that said goodbye without saying a word. Then she turned and left. She didn't take anything with her. Not the clothes, not the books, not even the flash drive. I sat there for hours after she was gone, staring at the screen, watching the images loop, watching versions of myself that no longer felt like me. I wasn't sure if I was the victim or the villain, if I had been seduced or simply chosen, if I had ever been in control. Days passed, then weeks. My husband never came back. No divorce papers, no calls, just absence, the kind that swallows everything in its path. I started locking my doors. I started sleeping with the lights on. I stopped answering the phone. I deleted every video, but never threw the drive away. It sat in the drawer next to my bed, humming like a memory too dangerous to destroy. Sometimes I still taste her, in the back of my throat, in the corners of my dreams. I wake up breathless, unsure whether I want to scream or reach for her. There's no resolution, no closure, just the knowledge that I was pulled into something I thought I wanted, and maybe I did, but not like this, not recorded, not archived, not kept like a collection of moments that never truly belonged to me. This wasn't a love story. It wasn't even betrayal. It was a performance I didn't know I was in, and now the curtain never falls.